It's time for episode 3. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're doing the 3rd episode of the first chapter gauntlet, where I am reading the first chapter of 5 books at a time here out of a total of 20, and trying to make a snap decision on if I think this is something I want to unhaul, if I think this is something that I might get to later, or if it's something that I'm actually really excited about. We had some mixed results. The first episode had a lot of winners. The second episode had some interesting ones too, but didn't hit quite as hard. So we'll see where we land with this episode here. Now the books we have today are Gates of Stone by Angus MacLellan. I have no memory of getting this book, but I'm assuming it was a random book outlet purchase from like early when I started using book outlet, because this has been on the shelf a long while. Child of the Daystar by Bryce O'Connor. This is book 1 of the Wings of War series. I think this was a random half-price books pickup that I thought, like, it's got a dragon on the front, pretty short. That one. Speaking of dragons, we have Flight of the Darkstar Dragon by Benedict Patrick. I also don't actually remember where I got this either, but I've had it for some time as well. Then we have The Etched City by K.J. Bishop, which I think was also probably a random book outlet. And we have this collection from Gary Kilworth, which is, it's a series, it's The Roof of Voyaging, The Princely Flower, and Land of Mists. And I think I looked up at one point what the series was called, but it doesn't say, and I don't recall. But this is a trilogy. I think it's supposed to be like Polynesian, and this was also just something random from, I think, Half Price Books. If you notice the theme, these are all stuff I've had for a long time that I just had no plans to get to. I don't usually know really anything about the books at this point, and so giving them a shot and seeing how it turns out. Let's start with Gates of Stone. Let's see if we have a map here. We do. So this looks like a kind of interesting climate here as well. And let's try the first chapter. Great, so chapter 1 of Gates of Stone. Kind of interesting with the descriptions of the different lands and the areas there. But the first chapter is we have this princess who is part of an arranged marriage. And then in the marriage bed, after her new husband falls asleep, she kills him with a ceremonial knife and is apparently wanting to come into power of her own. I did read the blurb on the back a little bit after reading the first chapter, and so it sounds like it's she wanted to be the heir of the throne from the place she comes from and was refused, and so that's why she's kind of going to here. This is one where I don't know, I was kind of like, on it. Like, that's a kind of an interesting first chapter where you end with her murdering the person she just married. This is one, though, that, like I said, I'm kind of interested to see what happens, but I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. It's probably one I'd have to read a little bit more to really get a good judge on. So we'll, I've been wishy-washy on what my criteria here is or not with it, but it is so hard to judge. In some books, like I said, this one had an interesting start, so I feel like it'd be one I would try a little bit more of. Alright, next up, we'll go to Child of the Daystar by Bryce O'Connor. So as always, let's check first for a map, and there it is. I had to flip it a little bit. So this is, I'm trying to figure out, oh, those are water bits. This is the contrast here. For some reason, actually in the camera when I'm looking, it seems really obvious, but for some reason I didn't realize right after that. So there's our map there. And let's try the first chapter. So this one, I am not entirely sure what's happening here. So there was a prologue. In the prologue, we're following some slavers. They take these, they're called Aetherians, which is like the dragon lizard people. And there's a child one, and he ends up attacking and killing somebody and being killed, and the slaver's really mad because apparently he was going to be worth a lot of money. So I think just trying to establish that there's a slave trade for them. But then the first chapter is following a caravan of like traders, and they're just kind of traveling. The main guy, his wife is pregnant, and apparently there's a prophecy about the child, and they think they see some bandits, and so not a lot happened, not really anything to tell me a whole lot there besides there's a prophecy. So I don't know, this one didn't really pull me in with the prologue or the first chapter. It just didn't really give me anything that made me like really interested to continue. So I think this one will move over to the unhaul pile for now. So let's go to the other one that's dragon-related, which is Flight of the Dark Star Dragon, and give this a shot. Well, of course, check for a map, and no map in this one. Alright, let's give it a shot. So this was different. So in this book, we have like a young cadet, and she's fresh from like whatever academy they come from, and given command essentially of a ship, but she's not like fully ranked yet. But her and the entire crew all kind of like wake up not remembering what's happened, and they're on a, not just a regular ship, a sky ship that flies with some sort of magical stone core thing. But it's failing, and they start falling, and they're just like falling and losing and trying to figure it out, and figure out what happens before they finally land in the ocean with all of these like fish swimming around that look almost like stars, and they realize that when they look up, there's actually, it's not sky above them, it's like somehow also ocean. So they're in some sort of like odd world, and there's like a little letter at the end of the first chapter that makes it seem like they went through some sort of rift or something. And so I'm very curious. This is one where the writing style, it feels like it's not going to work for me. I'm not a huge fan of the way that it's written. There's nothing wrong with it either. Just kind of like my personal taste sensors are kind of like buzzing, like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. But with everything here, this had a pretty long first chapter, and so I just feel like it did a really good job establishing what's going on and giving me some major hooks. There's the magic with the ship. There's also somebody else who has this thing called a parasite glove that gives them like superhuman strength, and so I'm like, there's a lot of interesting stuff on, so I'm curious. This is pretty short overall. It's a little over 200 pages, so I feel like just the first chapter, I already feel like that's where the first chapter ends in this book. So like, I feel like that's already a pretty good chunk. So yeah, I'm pretty curious. This is one that I'll probably bump up, and then maybe once I get further, I'll realize that no, I actually don't care for this. Maybe we'll find out, but I'm curious. So we're gonna try it out. All right. So next up we have the Etched City with this cover that looks like a pomegranate with bees in it. I also don't really know anything about this one either. Like I said, I think this was some random book outlet pick. Let's see if we have a map here. Flip. Nope. Part 1. Nope, no map. Okay. All right. Let's give it a shot. This is another one that I kind of don't know how to feel about. So, it's set in it's like a desert setting. And the writing style and the prose is really interesting. I don't fully know how I feel about it, but it's kind of interesting, and I can't think of what quite to compare it to. But you have basically somebody who is like a healer, a surgeon, who's traveling, and she runs into somebody else who's a killer that she knows from her past. It turns out they were part of the Revolutionary Army that was fighting against, but then the army fell out of favor, and her unit, basically led by this other person that she runs into, kind of became like bandits and stealing, but now they're hunted, and they're all like split up and talking about if they've seen any of the others. And that's kind of the setup. They end up traveling together, and they're both kind of trying to find somewhere else. It seems kind of very abstract. And so that's kind of the base description. It was also a pretty long first chapter, which is why it gave me a pretty good idea for the feel. And I don't know that it's for me, but at the same time, I also feel like this is something that people that aren't me might really enjoy. So I was looking at the back of the book, and the like blurb at the top is, combine equal parts of Stephen King's Dark Tower series and China Melville's Perdido Street Station, throw in a dash of Aubrey Beardsley and J.K. Huysmans, and you'll get some idea of this disturbing, decadent first novel. I don't know who those the last two authors are. I didn't like Dark Tower, or at least the first book. I DNF'd very quickly. I could say it has kind of that odd Western feel, sort of. So I think if you like the bit more like abstract type books like that, like immediately this made me think of Jake the Book of Strummer. Jake, if you're watching this, I feel like you would enjoy this. I really think people would like this. So If the description sounds interesting, check it out. Or if you've read this, let me know, because I don't feel like this one is for me. I just don't feel like it's going to mesh with my tastes, but it's really well written, and it's the kind of thing that I have a feeling others would actually really enjoy, but I've never heard of this book mentioned ever, so I don't know. Let me know if you've read it. I'd be really curious, but I don't think I'm going to be somebody who enjoys it, so I'm going to move that to the unhauled pile for now. All right, next, what do we have next here? Oh, we're on the last one. Gosh, I can't even count, even when it's only to 5. So now we're moving on to this Kilworth. The first book is The Roof of Voyaging. That's what I'll be reading the first chapter of. Let's check, though, for a map and see what we got. So this has an intro from Science Fiction Gateway. We have an introduction from the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. Oh, and then finally we have a map here. Here we go. Okay. So it's kind of small. Let's say it's Oceania. Which, okay, it's sort of small, but that's interesting, and an interesting way of doing it. So, it's sort of interesting. All right. Well, let's try the first chapter. So this one, I skipped. There is an author's note, and then there's also a list of the Pantheon of the Gods, which is quite detailed, which I also skipped. Then on the title page, we get another kind of cool graphic here. And we get finally to part 1, so it takes a while to kind of get there. This is so interesting and kind of strange. So it opens with, the first part, is there's a giant head, like literally a head, rolling around on an island. And it's I'm gonna butcher this probably, but Ulupoka, the head. And apparently this head, what it does is it searches for like tired sailors who are near death, and it creeps up on them while they're asleep and bites their throats out. And that's what it does. It just creeps into this hut and bites the throat out of this sailor. And that's like the first part. And then we kind of move from there to who I assume is going to be the main character, which is Coupe or Coupe. It's Kupe. And he's some sort of noble. And one day he's fishing and a giant octopus steals the bait from his fishing line. And he just immediately decides, me and the crew, we're going after it. And so they go after it and chase this octopus for weeks because he feels like it's ordained by the gods for some reason. And then finally, and they ended up stopping on the island with the giant head, essentially, but then they move on. Finally, they get to this huge area in land, and that's where he decides, like, this is where they're going to fight it. And so then he fights this giant octopus, and he calls this land the Land of Mists. And then it doesn't even sound like he's going to specifically explore it, so maybe he's not going to be the main character. But it's like the way that people are described is they have like basically seafaring is just like a part of them. They can all just instinctually read the stars and remember where they're going when they're sailing. And by just coming back, they'll be able to explain clearly enough so that anyone else could get where they went. So really interesting. This is supposed to be kind of following Polynesian mythos. Which is not an area I'm super familiar with. Kind of all the seafaring, with just all these miscellaneous different like gods and creatures. I'm very curious. So this is a bit of a chunker overall, but at the same time, this is a whole trilogy. So while it's pretty darn long, I mean, it's around 800 pages, it looks like. When you split that into 3 books, it's not too bad. So probably with like the size of it and the pages, maybe 300-ish each, maybe a little more, I don't know, if you kind of went it down to a normal-sized book, but I'm really curious. So that's definitely going to be one that I'm going to hold on to, and at least try out the first full book, probably, and determine what I think. But that is it for this one. So we have 2 that I'm very curious on, one that I'm kind of like, and then 2 that I'll be moving to the unhauled pile, so a very balanced episode this time. And we just have 1 left. 5 more books to go with this, so we'll see if we get some more, like, runaway winners. Runaway are definitely not for me's, or, more middle kind of stuff as well. But we'll see, and that should be sometime next week. Let me know your thoughts if you've read any of these or thoughts on these as well. Like I said, I'm reading the first chapter. It's not really easy to get a strong opinion of a book on the first chapter alone. Not normally something I do, but trying to kind of clear space and just find out if these are things that I'm interested in. So doing that here. But let me know your thoughts. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description, as always, for the Wizardly Enclave Discord. If you want to chat books, whether any of these books, other books, really anything at all, it's a lot of fun and we'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.